I want to make a presentation about that and outlining what I mentioned in that paper. First of all, in the introduction part, I mentioned some terms that are relevant to the topic from psychology. And also, I mentioned the advantages of diversity and in the workplace, because diversity is getting more, success to the companies and working places. And also, I mentioned the discrimination types in my paper. And also, I mentioned in this article, I briefly explained the lawsuit of that, and I also used job advertisements as examples, because in the job advertisements, I will come in a minute, you'll see lots of discrimination is happening. And I just mentioned the common pitfalls and give tips under the title of how to conduct the hiring process, because it's a really important point to mention in the article. And also, I also mentioned the employment process and also after employment, because harassment and mobbing is a huge problem in the workplaces nowadays. And also, you can see the table here, and I asked, the researchers asked people what they felt discriminated against the most. And most of the people said they were discriminated against for their skin color, race, ethnicity, and nationality. And the second one was dress or appearance, and the following was age, sex, occupation, and this kind of variables were, the most popular ones. And in one of my presentations, there were people from 11 different countries, and I asked them, did you ever feel like you were being the victim of discrimination? And all of them raised their hands. And there were Americans, Black Americans and white Americans, and also from people from Russia, and, Turkey, Kosovo, and different countries, but all of them felt discriminated. So it's really a big problem. And as I said, I mentioned some terms, and they were mostly stereotype, prejudice, and discrimination. Because in stereotype, we can say that it's what we all do, actually, because most of the psychologists think that we are cognitive misers and we don't want to spend so much energy on thinking about people. So we just group them and generalize them, and that's why we all have stereotypes. But it becomes really dangerous when it turns into a prejudice or discrimination, because it starts to affect people's daily lives and even cause them to their lives. Like, for instance, in the Chapel Hill shooting, for instance, and Ferguson issues, you can see that people are being under the threat of death. So I put this picture because when you type stereotype maps to Google, you can see that there are lots of stereotype maps like this. And it seems really ridiculous to just, identify a whole nation or a whole country with just one word, but we all do that. And for instance, like ignorant, lazy, superior, selfish, these kind of words we use just to identify a whole nation. So this is really, this may turn into a real dangerous thing. And stereotype threat is a really big problem. Stereotype threat means that, from a psychological perspective, when you feel like you're being stereotyped, your success is affected by that, and your performance is affected by that. And there are some studies that are done with blacks and whites, and also boys and girls. As you can see here, blacks and whites, when there is no stereotype threat, blacks have much more successful, and when there is no stereotype threat, white people have decreased success. And also it's like that for the boys and girls. Girls have higher success when there is low stereotype threat. And this is the fact that, and for instance, when we don't see much successful women or black people around in the companies or in the workplaces, it's much more likely to be because of the stereotype threat, because their performances are decreasing according to this fact. And also, I know that it's a really old one, but Jane Elliott conducted a study. Actually, it wasn't a scientific one, but she's a third grade teacher, and after Martin Luther King died, she started to say that in the class, brown-eyed people are better than blue-eyed people are better than brown-eyed people, and she said that brown-eyed people have more of that chemical in their eyes, so brown-eyed people are better than those with blue eyes, she said to her students. And they're just 9 or 10, and they just believe what the teachers say. And when she talks scientifically, like melanin and these chemicals and these kind of words just made them believe in that. So they believed, and their success just increased and decreased according to that fact. And also they just started to turn into little monsters, and they just started hostility and being mean to each other just in one day. And in the second day, she said that I was wrong in the first day. Brown-eyed people are better than blue-eyed people, so they just immediately changed. Their success also started to increase and decrease according to that fact. So we're really open to be manipulated. And one of the terms I used was self-fulfilling prophecy. I know this is also an old one, but I needed to mention that because there was an interview study that they conducted, and they recorded the candidates' video records when they are having the interview. So they just found out that black candidates had shorter time for interviews, and they had less eye contact and more grammatical mistakes. So this means that when they, in the second part of the study, they behaved white candidate the same way, and so they also did the more grammatical mistakes. So as I said in the beginning, it's not about black people being so smart and intelligent and white people are being dumb. It's about these self-fulfilling prophecies and also the stereotype threats. I also mentioned the reason why from a psychological perspective and stages and how it happens and how to prevent this. And we worked on a project with Canadian students. Only one of them was Muslim, and they just found out this article from Zain, and she was saying that to get a job with a hijab in the first place is statistically 5 times more difficult than without. So it's a huge problem, 5 times the really big percentage and proportion. And they conducted a study about that. This lady just worn the hijab and hang around the mall for 3 hours to get used to behaving that. So with and without hijab, she just decided to do some applications, job applications, and turned into the stores and asked, are you looking for an employee for X position, or can I fill a form? What are your expectations from the employee? And she used the chronometer while she's asking that questions. And the result was, of course, the negative correlation, because the time spent with her was really low when she wears the hijab, the same person. And the perceived negativity was increasing, and this kind of stuff from the SPSS statistics, they just published this article. But it's just not about Muslim women or women in general. Most of the people have discrimination just because of their races or religion. And I found out that 48% of white evangelical Christians report experiencing or witnessing religious bias. So Christians also discriminated. And nearly 6 in 10 atheists agree that people look down on their beliefs. So 6 in 10 is a really big proportion. And even if they are getting employed, their salaries are differing, even though they are doing the same job or even though they are qualified the same. And Mazlumdar is a very well-known association in Turkey, and they just conducted a study about that. They did interviews with women, and one of them was really interesting, and I wanted to put this. Nadide was saying that the employers told her that working with a woman is risky. They often get married and quit, but we see it as social responsibility to hire them. But in the end, they offered the same salary that she gained 2 years ago. Even though she's more experienced, they know that she needed them, so they just offered the same salary, and they said, if you're not getting the job, someone else will. And you can see the gender differences for annual weekly earnings by gender. And black men are blue and women are red. You can see the difference here. And also promotions. I found out this website with the 4 men on the manager team, and the other whole team was women. But after I searched about that, they just announced some, we don't have anything like opposite to the women. We're just respecting them. That's not true kind of explanation, but I took them from their website, so I don't know, I just leave the decision to you. So women and some different racial backgrounds are getting to this glass ceiling, because they just can just go up and they can get promoted, but they cannot just because of these prejudices. And also I mentioned the lawsuit and hiring lawsuit, applicants' rights, and for employers in case of being claimed of discrimination, because as you can see there, 88% of people think that they are being the victim, so they just maybe assume that even though they are not being discriminated, so it's an important topic to cover. And also I found some job advertisements, and as an example I used them actually. For instance, here it says Filipino only, and must be good looking and must possess a very pleasing personality, not more than 30 years old. Age is also subject to discriminate. And store requires no Indians or Asians, please. And I found a Turkish job advertisement that is looking for a translator, and they just wanted small size women. I don't know what it has to do with the translation, but. And there's also another study I want to mention, conducted with 745 people and companies. The result was 35.1% of the participants says they don't want to hire Muslim people, hijabi women, and 12% of them said they don't want to get in touch with Muslim people in any ways. And their reason why for that is the customer satisfaction. They think that their hijabi employee will influence the work environment. And in the workplace, as I mentioned, glass ceiling is a big problem, and harassment and salary is the biggest problems after employment process. And you can see here the barriers, women progressing to top levels of the management. And you can see female think that it's much more, but male don't think it's a big problem really. So it depends on your perception as a male or female about glass ceiling. And these are my references. Thank you so much for listening to me. Any questions? Yeah.
Thank you for that. It was very good.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask for the evidence that you had for discrimination in terms of selection, right? Do you check, like you ask why, follow up with why they wanted these particular identities?
Why do they discriminate, the employers?
Like small, do you follow up with that? Like why do you pick on these small size people? Or do you blatantly ask, do you discriminate because you discriminate?
Actually, their reasons are different from each other, because there are lots of different types of discrimination, like for age, gender, race, religion. So their results were different, but which one exactly are you asking for?
I'm referring to the specific slide.
Okay, which one?
The email, like the one where you raised, like they picked small size women.
Oh yeah, the translator. Yeah.
Translator.
Uh-huh.
So you follow up with asking why?
No, I didn't, because I found out that most of them do that. In Turkey, for instance, they ask for 155 meters height for women and 170 for men when they are looking for a translator, because they are going to be present for the customers, so they want them to be more good looking, and they look for the small size women.
Is that your interpretation, or is that what they told you?
No, they just have written to the job advertisement.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. 4. The explanation I come up with was the black people were being discriminated and they're under threat, so they were just under stress while they were answering the items to be solved. Yeah.
The one for
boys and girls, yeah.
Yeah, so because they are, I guess boys, they do better when they have high stereotype, right?
Yeah. Because they think they are privileged, and for instance, if it's a math test, the number of correct answers are going to be higher because they are feeling more comfortable in the environment. But when they are doing anonymously, they don't. Their success just decreases. Is that the answer for your question?
So this is just for like math tests and so I'm asking like so they know that so this is if you tell them that boys are better at math
Uh-huh.
and we take the test then the boys
It's just not for math. Most of the time they are more comfortable and the results were like that.
then what is the environment for low stereotype traits?
For low stereotype threats, girls were more successful. They replied 9.47 and boys 8. So this is the part for low stereotype. High. Sorry? I don't know how many people they. Since they're boys and girls, they must be around 15. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah. Okay. Yes.
What about non-Muslim women?
Yeah.
Again, do non-Muslim women have any discrimination against Muslim women who is wearing hijab?
Yeah, of course. I mentioned them also, like in this slide, Christian.
We're talking about non-Muslim women.
Yeah.
Does it show?
In the glass ceiling topic here.
Because the way I see it, it's more like the male dominating the women.
Yeah,
Which
yeah,
is
and
the game of your presentation.
yeah,
But I'm looking from the women's perspective,
yeah,
from a women, non-Muslim women
yeah.
against Muslim women who's wearing hijab. Do you have an example of it?
Comparing hijabi and non-hijabi women, I didn't search for it, but for instance, in this example, these women are not Muslim, so they are also being discriminated. And in this one, their weekly earnings by gender is also different.
You answer my question?
No, I don't think so. Ha, sen? Evet.
Müslüman olmayan kadınlar Müslüman olan kadınlara ayrımcılık uyguluyor mu?
Huh. No, I didn't search about that. No.
No same thing.
No. But that's a good question to search for. Yeah, thank you. Okay, thank you so much for listening to me.